Welcome to From the Carmel. This is Moriah, the podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and stories that make our community so unique. I'm your host, Ethan Kushner, and today is July 5th. So first of all, we want to wish a belated happy 4th of July to all of our American viewers and listeners. Hope you had a good time barbecuing. Every synagogue has a building, every congregation has a rabbi, but what truly defines a community are the people who walk through its doors each week, bringing with them their own journeys, dreams, challenges, and hopes. Today's episode is a little different. Instead of focusing on one topic, we're introducing you to four remarkable members of the Moriah family, whose lives could hardly be more different, yet who have all found a home in the same community. You'll meet a young couple who left lives on two different continents, Nicole and Gil, to build a future together in Israel. You'll hear from an American immigrant, Yaakov, who chose to serve as a lone soldier in Israel Defense Forces before beginning a new chapter as a student at the University of Haifa. And you'll meet Tal, an Israeli physician and mother of three, balancing the demands of home, family, work, and what community means and what Jewish life means to her, too. Together, their stories remind us that there is no single path to belonging. We come from different countries, speak different languages, pursue different professions, and arrive at the same or maybe even sometimes different experiences. So this is what Moriah looks like, not just a congregation, but a family. So welcome to the podcast, my friends. How are you? You can talk.
Very good.
We're doing great.
All right. So Gil, Nicole, I'll start with you, if it's okay. You come from, Gil comes from the United States. Nicole comes from South America. How did you meet? Let's start with that basic question.
The easy answer is community. And we both lived in Herzliya at the same time for a couple of years. And the community of lone soldiers of Olim Chadashim in Herzliya is very tight-knit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a matter of time until we happened to be at the same place at the same time. And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. So what brought you to Haifa?
I'm a student at Technion. So I moved to Haifa in 2021, and my lovely lady followed me a little bit
I'm the
later.
plus one.
You're the plus one. I think there's also a plus two there, but we may hear her later.
Our little
in
dog
the
is
show.
hiding here somewhere.
If you hear her
But-
barking,
Yeah,
she's saying, "We
Nicole-
love Kila Moria."
Yeah, Nicole, tell me a little bit about the move from South America to Israel. What brought you here?
I was 18 years old, so over 10 years ago is when I moved. And I mean, I think it's two things. There's obviously the ideological aspect, Zionism, and just my belief that Israel is a place for the Jewish people. I come from a family, my grandparents are Holocaust survivors, and I felt like moving here was kind of honoring their sacrifice and the things that they went through. But there's also an aspect when you come from South America or anywhere in the developing world, it's not always 100% ideological. I also wanted a better life, a safer life, economic and educational opportunities that I wouldn't necessarily have back home. So that also played a role.
And your move to Haifa from Herzliya was okay? You followed Gil gladly, wantingly?
Look.
I mean, it's not Tel
Um,
Aviv, yeah? It's not
yeah,
the center of
making-
Israel.
When I made Aliyah, I came straight to Herzliya, and it was just such a soft landing because there's a lot of internationals, and I didn't really need to know Israelis or speak Hebrew, which I think it was a soft landing, but I do think it made me a disservice because it did take me, I was in a comfort zone in a bubble. So it took me a long time to actually make the effort to learn Hebrew and meet Israelis. After, when we moved to Haifa, we were much limited in terms of our access to internationals and etc. And just there's just less options of social things to do. Our friends were back then still in the center of the country. So it took a while to make Haifa feel at home, but I will say that this is the place where we really established a relationship. Here's where we got engaged and we got married in the area as well. So it's really Haifa has a very special place in our heart, and it's obviously where we joined Kilat Moriah. So it's
Good.
also very
We'll talk.
important.
Save that thought because we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But let's introduce and bring Yaakov Steinberg into the conversation. Hi, Yaakov. How are you?
Hello, doing all right.
Great. Well, I have to confess, I met Yaakov several years ago when I don't even remember how we made the connection, how the connection was made. You may remember better than I do. My mind is already wandering sometimes. But Yaakov was a lone soldier serving here. He moved to Haifa from Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. And I have to say that I uh, fell in love with Yaakov almost from the second I saw him. As you can see, he's got a great smile and a fantastic personality. So Yaakov, let's start with what brought you to Israel, and then what made you move from Jerusalem to Haifa.
Mm, big questions.
Okay.
Why I made Aliyah? While I didn't spend my entire life in exactly Zionist communities, I grew up at first Hasidish, Haredi, Orthodox, whatever y'all might know it as. Later on, I started spending more time in Zionist communities, and Israel became a really important value to me. And at a certain point, I felt like if I hold something to be such a central and important value, then I need to do more than just advocate for it. I need to be there. And while that's not necessarily the right choice for everybody, I felt like that was the right choice for me. And ultimately, I spent a gap year here. Spending a gap year here allowed me to start realizing that I might want to live here. I fell in love with Israel on my gap year. And after visiting my family, after the first lockdown ended, I immediately came back to Israel, made Aliyah, served in the army. Um,
I lived in Jerusalem.
and then I lived in Jerusalem for a time, and I came to a decision after I finished my army service of needing to decide where I wanted to study. And when I was thinking about where I wanted to live, I knew access to nature was really important to me. I knew that maybe a slower pace of life than Jerusalem in a number of ways was important to me too. And a vibrant, conservative, or Masorti Jewish community was really important to me too. And there's only one place like that, Moriah.
Okay, well, that's great. That's a fantastic thing, and I like the fact that you said that Haifa is a different pace than Jerusalem. Yes, it is in many ways.
Absolutely.
So as Haifa is a different pace than Herzliya or the Tel Aviv area. So that leads me to our last guest here on the show. Not last, but definitely not least, Tal Gazit. Tal and I kind of have, I would say, almost a same kind of similar background. We grew up in Israel. We grew up in the United States as well. We have that kind of a shared history. But Tal, tell me just briefly. You grew up here in Haifa. You also grew up in the Seattle, Washington area. Um, Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So actually, I grew up in a lot of places, but I was born and raised in Jerusalem when I was very young, before my parents left Israel when I was 12. Beforehand, we also spent a little bit of time in New Jersey. So I actually saw myself as a Jerusalemite and an Israeli. I think Judaism at the time was tangential. I mean, it's ever so prevalent in Israeli life, but it wasn't something I was seeking. I would go to high holiday services, and that was about it. And then living in the States in several places, I started encountering both anti Semitism and also being a minority and what that meant. And that actually made Judaism more and more important to me. So I started seeking it more on my own. And I actually brought it into my own parents' home because it wasn't so important to them at the beginning. So we moved around mostly in Orthodox communities at the beginning, because that's what you find in Israel. You don't really
Mm-hmm.
find conservative Judaism as much.
So,
So that was my early years.
and what made you come to Haifa? As someone who grew up in Jerusalem.
Well, wandering around at the end when I got back to Israel, I was actually also served as a lone soldier because I returned to live in Israel on my own. And I served in Chatzor, which is way down south near Ashdod. And afterwards, I was looking to study medicine, and I got accepted to the Technion. So that's where I kind of migrated to this area and met my husband here.
And you were able to stay here because you got a job at one of the leading hospitals here in Haifa, and So let me ask you, let me ask all of you a question. Obviously, different backgrounds, different reasons for a coming to Israel, but you've all kind of nestled here in Haifa. So I'll start with Yaakov. Um, you intimated that you were looking for a Masorti congregation when you moved to Haifa. So, what
Mhm.
were your first experiences? What were your first impressions of Moriah when you walked through our doors?
So, two memories immediately came to mind. The first was when I visited Haifa for a Shabbat, in order to get to see what and experience what the community was like. And I remember at that time it was Rav David welcoming me in with a lovely smile, a bunch of shul members coming over to chat with me, get to know who I was, why I was visiting, and welcome me in, really. The second memory that came to my mind was when I actually moved to Haifa. One of my first experiences in the city and with the community was when you, Eitan, Rav David, another shul member, and I think your daughter as well, Shani, all helped me move my stuff in. And I don't know to what extent y'all were aware of that it was a fourth floor walk up,
We weren't.
but
No
but
elevator either.
I like to joke that my apartment was built before the invention of interior design. Sometimes,
But I do
um,
have to say one thing, Yaakov. When I moved my daughter to Jerusalem when she was studying at the Hebrew University, I had to climb 8 stories. So yours was only half.
בסדר, טוב. So that was just when I think about Moriah and my first early memories of the community and Haifa in general, that's one place where I always go to and it always makes me smile and remember.
Tal, you?
I actually first learned that there is a conservative community during COVID because I was really interested in putting up an egalitarian minyan outdoors because we weren't allowed to really hold anything in any synagogue spaces. And I contacted Aryeh Cheskin, who heads the Israeli conservative movement in Kehilot, and he connected me with Rav David. So I got to meet him. He was really, really kind. He also connected me with Hagit Moezis, who lives in my neighborhood and is also a congregation member.
Right.
And together we managed to actually put an egalitarian minyan, which was not easy because Chabad on our premises were very unhappy about that. But it did take place, and there were lots of onlookers who came and just said it was a beautiful, beautiful service. They haven't really seen anything like that before. And my daughter was also right at the time getting to her age of bat mitzvah, so I was already looking for a community to be in. So afterwards, I just at that time I joined, and Nitzan did her bat mitzvah in Kilat Moriah. And I've been a member ever since.
So I'm going to guess, I'm going to venture a bet that when I ask the same question of Nicole and Gil, they're going to tell me that the thread that brought them to Keilat Moriah was Rav David Arias. Is that correct? Is that going to be a perfect score here?
And we did not know actually.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I remember our very first time coming to Kilat Moriah. Rav David was on a little vacation with his family,
Okay.
Like we
and
heard that there was a South American rabbi, and we actually
and
didn't meet him the first
I
time.
remember, yeah, you made an announcement and you said, "Oh, in a week or so, a Bakurchik from South America will be here," and we look at
Oh,
each other
okay.
like,
So
"Oh,
you
cool."
actually joined before Rav David joined the congregation or
No,
came
like
to?
No,
he was
he
on
just happened
vacation.
to
Oh, he was
be
on
in
vacation.
Chul for a
Okay.
few weeks.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So
So
what were your first impressions, Nicole, Gil,
I
of
think for
Moriah, and why
us,
did you choose? Why did you seek us out?
yeah, for us, I think Gil and I come from a bit of different religious backgrounds. Gil grew up Orthodox in the United States, and I grew up nothing,
Jewish.
just Jewish in Ecuador, um, where there's not a lot of Jews and not a lot of communities, and just like I think going to synagogue had never been like a very important part of my life. So we go from like trying to like compromise between Gil like being very used to going to synagogue and being very part of a community, of a certain community, and me like not being used to it all. And how do we find a middle ground where we're both happy, where we also like have the sense of community that I think and religion that Gil was yearning for, and I also feel comfortable to be myself and don't feel I don't know, like away in a corner only with the women, not understanding what's happening, which
Yeah.
is what I had felt a lot of times in Orthodox synagogues. So I think we just did a good old
We
Google
did, yeah, we
search.
did the most rational thing someone could do, is just typed
So
on Google Maps, shul near me, and we looked
show
at
near
No,
me,
but
and that's what popped up. Okay.
we went to a few. We tried a few synagogues before we got to Moriah, I have to say.
Okay.
But I think like once we got to Moriah, we knew that we found the place that answered to what we both
Yeah.
needed.
I just noticed that our family of interviewees grew by one, by a four-legged friend. Hi, Cherry. But Nicole, let me ask you a question. You grew up in Ecuador. You didn't, and you say you didn't grow up in a religious background. So so obviously you partnered with Gil, who came from a background maybe not as similar as Yaakov, but Orthodox. And Tal also said that she kind of ran around the Orthodox circles in her childhood. So does that make? How did you make that transition, and how difficult or how strange or how comforting you choose which direction you want to go in?
Mhm. Well, in Ecuador, there's as of now like 200 Jews in the whole country. And we did have a synagogue growing up, but in order to be the home for those 200 Jews, it had to be like very, very like no one would make a face to you if you're like on your phone during services. It was very like
Back.
open and laid back and tolerant, and like I'd go there only for the high holidays. And I honestly thought that was it. I didn't know that there was much more to it. Um, until I came to Israel, and some friends started telling me that there's more to being Jewish than just going to the synagogue in the high holidays. They taught me about kashrut and other things, but I thought, okay, this is too much. It's really not for me. Um, and I think, like in a way, finding Moriah, it's almost like it feels a lot more like a synagogue than where I went back home, but it has the same openness and laid backness, I guess, in a way, and just like comfort that my synagogue had, with all the additional things that I didn't know about. Like I didn't know that synagogue you can also go like during the week, that you don't have to wait for Kippur to go. Um, yeah, but it has like when I went in Ecuador, like I would sit with my mom and my dad, and I would wear pants, and it was totally fine. And I didn't know that there were places like that in Israel until we found Moriah. Like I thought in Israel, there was only Orthodox, or at least that was my impression. I was actually so surprised. Gil was the one that had to explain to me what conservative Judaism in Israel was.
I think he did a good job. Tal, you mentioned the fact that you
Mhm.
actually looked for a place where you can have a bat mitzvah for your daughter. Now, this is not a common thing in Israel. So, can you walk me through the process that you and your husband took in thinking that this is something that's really important in a young girl's life here in Israel? Because again, it's kind of outside the norm.
Yeah, so when I was 12, we had just a party, a celebration. It was my brother who did an Agala Torah. But living in the States, with my nuclear family still there, all of my nieces had a bat mitzvah, and they actually went to a Reform synagogue. Um, and so we saw what it was like to have that kind of a celebration based on our experience there. And it became important to us, Jewish community. In Seattle, we were members of Bet Shalom, a conservative synagogue. And at that point, I was already gravitating away from Orthodoxy to conservative Judaism for many reasons. One of them is just wanting to be more part of the service. I'd also hoped to learn how to read from the Torah, which is something I achieved this past month for the first time, um, thanks to a Torah reading class that Rabbi Mati Schulz holds. But it was also because in Israel, back home, Orthodox Judaism has become really mixed into right wing politics and has become very, very intolerant. And so the more it became this way, the more I knew that there was no going back. I just didn't find a space there anymore. And so I was really looking for something that was much more egalitarian and open and liberal.
It's a great segue that you just gave me, Tal, because I'd like to ask you, Yaakov. You came from a very tight knit community where you grew up in the New York area, and here, we mentioned the fact that it's very open and and you were looking for that type of environment. I'm going to ask you this. Number one, how you look at that transition that you made without from Orthodoxy to conservative Judaism, but also the fact that you came from a very tight knit community. And the sense of community here in Israel, because we're all Jews, because we're Israelis, is not as prevalent and as important as it may be in the diaspora. So, how do you see community life here in Israel as a synagogue being kind of the focal point for that? If you're following my logic,
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Shuls
that's my
and
job, is to give the interesting questions.
yeah, the function of a shul is very different in the U.S. than it is in Israel. But I think something that's universal is people wanting to feel like they have a place they know they can belong. And I think that also relates to the first part of your question, which is how I think about the transition that I went through from a more uh, ultra Orthodox community towards the communities that I find myself in now, like Moriah. And I think it's because I wanted to find a place where I could feel like I could belong as a member of as a member of the LGBT community, as well as somebody whose Judaism is important to him to do. And that it's also important to me that the Judaism that I do and the place that I belong to is a place where as many other Jews as possible, regardless of their identity or background, can feel like they belong. And the Judaism that Moriah represents is a Judaism that, to me, cares deeply that its members feel like they can belong and do belong there.
So, Gila Nicole, I'll ask you this: in the way that you interpret Judaism here, conservative Judaism, Masorti Judaism in Israel, does it require that you show up at synagogue every Shabbat, Friday, or are there other ways? Don't laugh. Are there other ways of expressing the community type of environment without without having to uh, play the ritual part on a constant basis? You?
If it was every week, we'd be in a little bit of trouble. We try
Okay.
to make it as much as we can. We really enjoy Friday night services. We try to go
Yeah, but
almost every week.
it's way more than that. Like we mentioned before, that our social circles were a lot easier in the Mercas, in the center of the country, and we were a bit
Yeah.
isolated when we first moved here. So joining Keilat Moria is not only the option of having a place to go on Fridays, it's also like community events and causes to volunteer with together and the community trips, and even like if someone in the community, for example, I love to paint, and I've had the opportunity to organize like painting nights for the community, and we might have like a Jewish or a spiritual element, but it's like not necessarily around the prayer or the tradition. We have way more than that. So I think that's like a really different or cool thing that people might maybe don't associate with necessarily being part of a synagogue.
Hmm.
It's like more than the prayers.
So, Tyler, I'm going to ask you this: how difficult? I mean, you went and you came and you sought, you called the Masorti movement. They told you, excuse me, that Kilat Moriah and Haifa exists. But for an average Israeli, why do you think that conservative Judaism, which kind of is in between, it's not Orthodox, it's not Reform, it's very much in tune with, I think, how many Israelis feel, or do they really feel, or maybe it's a misconception on my part, do they feel that conservative Judaism, Masorti Judaism, has a place in their home, or is it kind of a lost cause?
So in my mind, I think there's no movement within Judaism that fits Israel more than conservative Judaism, just because of what you said, that it's kind of in the middle of the road. People are more interested in, I guess, more traditional kind of Judaism than Reform Judaism offers. And at the same time, most people are not halachic and they wouldn't be looking really to live an Orthodox life. But I think there's a lot of ignorance. When I speak to people around me, they've never heard of conservative Judaism. They've never heard that women can actually serve as rabbis and that can actually read from the Torah. And some of them become exposed to it one of two ways. Either they go abroad and they do, just like a lot of physicians, they live abroad, they do residency fellowship, just like I did, and they become immersed in a local community, and all of a sudden Judaism becomes important to them. They might meet someone who comes from there, or I find that most of the weddings I attended in Israel in the past 2 or 3 years, especially of secular Jews, they completely did not want to have an Orthodox ceremony. And so they sought out conservative or Reform rabbis. And that's the first time they actually hear that you can get married outside of the Orthodox movement, though the marriage is not recognized in Israel, which is another problem. But that's the first opening to there being actually something different within the Jewish world. And most of them are not aware at all that the majority of Jews outside of Israel are far away from being Orthodox. I think that explains why a lot of people are not really fighting to make sure that all forms of Judaism are equally represented and recognized within Israel.
Yaakov, I'm going to ask you, you not only do you visit Kilat Moriah and you're a regular davener in the synagogue, but you also go to other minyanim. You go to Technion and you hang out there. You go to, Haifa University and various other places. Talk to me about the differences that you find in the different type of communities here in Haifa, and
Yeah.
compare them to Moriah. And I guess where I'm trying to lead you is, does Moriah have a place for millennials or Gen Zs, for instance?
Absolutely. I think I go to all these different communities that you mentioned within Haifa because I love connecting with people.
Right. Which is
And
why I asked you this question.
yeah, and one of the things I love that happens at Moriah is the last Shabbat. I haven't been able to go to the last one. I wasn't able to go to the last one because I wasn't in Haifa, which was really disappointing to me. But at the last Shabbat of every month, for the millennials, Gen Zers, who we don't necessarily have a family who we go home to and do kiddush and do a Shabbat meal. So there's a potluck Shabbat meal that we put together at the last Shabbat of every month, and that's really lovely. It's a chance to just spend time together and hang out, and it's always a lot of fun. And that's just one example of how there's a space at Moriah for people who are Gen Z, millennial, whatever.
Yeah, it's
So
one of
now-
our favorite parts too.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask Nicole, and here I have to divulge a little secret. Nicole is also not only is she a good congregant, but she's also our community organizer, which means she does a lot of the social programming that we mentioned in this show, and we mentioned in other shows and other programs as well. So Nicole, when you now let's talk tachlis, let's talk professionalism. We have a challenge. The challenge is to make our congregation viable to younger crowds. How much of a barrier do you see it today? You've been doing this for, I don't know, about half a year or so, maybe a little more, but how much of a barrier do you think that exists between your generation? I wish I could call myself your generation, but your generation, yours and Yaakov's generation, and Moriah here in Haifa. And
Eitan,
how do
you're
we
young.
overcome that barrier? I'm sorry?
You're young. You're
Okay,
part of
thank
the
you.
young crew.
I'm an honorary member.
Look, I think it's tough. I think I like working in community organization because I do identify with a lot of the young people that have so much going on. Like people around my age, like in their late 20s, early 30s, are still like trying to figure out work and life and maybe having like more than one job. And sometimes it feels like community or like synagogue kind of goes like it's below in their priorities of their lives in terms of just like lacking the energy or the time. So I do understand where sometimes the challenge for the younger people in joining comes. However, I do think like there are a lot of things that we can do. There is a gap. Like a lot of our congregants are on the older side, and that's okay. And I think that there's a lot that we can do to bridge the gap. So we're making our social media a lot more active. We're trying to create events that are attractive for different age groups or that bring people from different age groups together. Yeah, thinking outside of the box, even contacting our younger members and asking, what do you like to do, or what can you offer? What would you like to have? A lot of our events for the younger people are, for example, not on Fridays or Saturdays, but on Thursday nights, which is like the day that they're available. So I think it takes a little bit of creativity and thinking outside the box to bridge those gaps, and it's a work in progress. We, as you know, we work on this all the time. But I do have to say that I do think that the meeting between people of different generations makes the synagogue, our community, very special. Like I think I told you a story. Like I went to like a few community events back when my husband was in reserve duty, and I was alone at home, and I was having a really hard time. And I sat next to someone who himself served in so many wars, and he had like this whole lifetime of experiences, and he was telling me what he went through and what his family went through, and it kind of made me feel like, like this is not a new thing. I'm not going through it alone. There's so many people from different ages and different generations that like I can share with and identify with. And yes, I think it can be very beautiful. I don't think we should cater only to like the younger or the older. I think we need to cater to both separately and also together.
Tal, I noticed that in the last few weeks, you bring your daughter with you to Shabbat services. Is that a struggle? Do you have to have a discussion before you get in the car and come to synagogue, or is that something that is kind of comes from her, so to speak?
So it's kind of a funny story because I was sure she didn't want to go. I would mostly ask my youngest one enough if she wanted to go with me because she was up and awake on Saturday morning. She'd be like, "No, it's really boring. I'm not coming, Mom." So I would go by myself, and I found myself, except for holidays where some of them would come with my family, mostly alone. And all of a sudden, when I was gone and I was in the States taking care of my mom several weeks back, my daughter went to shul with my husband, Nitzan, and then Elad said, she says you never asked her. If you had asked her, she would have said yes. And so ever since then, she's been coming with me. And the funny thing is, this past Saturday, I was so tired. I was like, maybe I'll just skip shul. And she comes up, knocks on the door. Eva, it's 9:30. We have to get going. We have to get to synagogue. So yeah, I guess it does come from her. I'm actually sitting in her room now.
So I was going to ask, the drums are not something that you participate in. That's
No, that's hers. That's
that's
her.
her
She's a
gig.
drummer.
All
She's a
right.
drummer.
Yes. Okay. So we should have asked her to kind of accompany us in the background. We have a few minutes left, and it's amazing how time flies on these podcasts, and we only scratched the surface. So, the audience that we are focused on is kind of in the diaspora, and it is. I mean, here we are for 40 minutes. We're trying to give a little taste of what it means to be a Masorti Jew here in Israel and in Israel in general, and Haifa in particular. So, Yaakov, if you had right now, you have a stage, you have the platform. I'm not asking people to make aliyah to Israel, but you know, again, there's a lot of, especially because, well, there's four of us who grew up or had some years of growing up in the U.S. and Nicole in Ecuador. See, I got it right, Nicole. And but there's a lot of controversy regarding Israel. Um, a a lot because in the Jewish community in the U.S., for instance, and a lot of it has to do because of the religious intolerance that exists in this country. So, Yaakov, you think about that question because I know that Tal has like a ready-made answer for that. So I'm going to switch to you, Tal. So, you know, tell you tell it as it is, so to speak.
Should I give you an anecdote?
Sure.
So a couple of years ago, we were actually in Jerusalem celebrating Yom Kippur, and we were in a hotel. And there were people who were moved to the hotel because of the north being at war. And so there was a community from Tzfat. And they actually took over the hotel synagogue and decided it was like their own community synagogue. And I didn't recognize that this is what was going on. So I come in with my talit, and I come in to pray, and there's a separate women and men section. And I go to the women's section, just like I know. I mean, this is obviously, it is more of an Orthodox space. And I came in, and there was a whole discussion the entire service, whether they should throw me out, whether I'm Christian, whether I'm actually Jewish, whether they should actually stone me. It's an entire discussion among the women on the women's section. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to survive this service? Am I going to survive this service? I'm not here for them. I'm here because it's important to me. I'm Jewish. This is my religion. And this is my relationship with God, has nothing to do with them. And I actually survived the service. And one of the younger women came out and said, I want you to apologize for the way they acted. It was so unkind. And I turned around and I said, thank you. You know, we all are Jewish and we come with our own traditions wherever we come from. And the next morning, the men who have been told there was this traitor or I don't know what, or transgressor who came into shul on Yom Kippur to their space, which really is not their space. It's a common space for all hotel comers. They had the whole discussion and they started a debate. It's really the talit from a halachic mitzvah, or is it allowed or not allowed for a woman to wear it? So I thought, maybe I was there for a reason. It actually caused a trigger, like sparked a debate among them to stop and think about some things. But it was not a very nice experience. And then some of the people I know were saying, what were you thinking? Going into any space in Jerusalem where you don't know that this is an actual conservative or reform space and coming in with your women's talit. It's a clearly women's talit. It has decorations from the Ethiopian Jewish community, and the women there typically wear talitot, which was one of the arguments that was raised in that day. But it was not a very fun experience. And I think it definitely outlines the kind of things that we have to go through over here.
So, Yaakov, pluralism in Israel, yes, no, does it exist? I mean, can we emulate the type of pluralism that exists in Judaism in North America, for instance?
I think absolutely. We spoke earlier in the conversation about how there's an appetite for it. It's just not necessarily that people know that there's something that answers that need. I think there's also, as somebody who spent most of their life in the U.S., I didn't know a lot about Israeli society. I didn't know that, for example, there are all different kinds of Jews in Israel, Ethiopian Jews, for example. The Bnei Menashe is another example. And that ties into what I believe Israel should be, which is a home for as many Jews as possible. And that ties into my belief about what kind of Judaism I think can exist here. Yeah.
Gil, Nicole, the last word to you. So, Israel, can it embrace true pluralism like the one that we know from other countries in the diaspora?
Well, first off,
Or is it
make
or is
Aliyah.
it the
Very
separation of
important.
church and state? Yeah. First of all, make Aliyah, okay?
Well, first off, the fact that Kilat Moriah exists and there's many other conservative shows scattered around the country, it's not like it doesn't exist. I mean, there is the option for those that are interested. There's no not too political, but I don't know of any movement to get the conservative movement in Israel canceled by any means.
Well, they make our life difficult. Let's put it that way. The establishment. They don't make it easy to be a conservative Jew in Israel.
Yeah.
And so what do you think? So briefly, in a sentence, each one of you, what's the future of Moriah? Where do you see Moriah in, say, 10 years from now? Yaakov?
I think in 10 years from now, I see it as a community of Haifaim. It comes from
Haifaim.
Haifaim, yeah. I'm not going to stick with the English there. A community of Haifaim for Haifaim by Haifaim, really representing the people who want a Judaism that they feel like they can belong to in the city.
Gil, Nicole?
A few years could use some more young people. I hope the young people community of Kilat Moriah grows a lot in the next 5-10 years. That's my wish to the shul.
Yeah, but I do believe that we need to keep our essence and continue being a home for absolutely everyone, no matter where they see their Judaism, and be just the opening and wonderful special place that we are in a newer, nicer building, maybe. And I don't know, I just wish this community a lot of great new things.
Amen. Amen.
Tal, the last word to you. So we're counting on your daughters. Where do you see Moriah 10 years from now?
I definitely am optimistic because I think Israelis are beginning to re-own their Judaism because it's becoming so extremist in the milieu around. And so for those people who are interested in openness and in belonging, I do see more and more, even of my colleagues, just stopping by from time to time and seeing what the shul is like. So I do hope that it has, and I do believe it'll have a very vibrant kind of future with some of the younger folk coming in, just like my daughters. We're actually showing some interest of their own in being members of the community and seeing how nice it is. So I do think that it'll be a place for Haifaim to come, just like Yaakov was saying. Anybody who cares about their Judaism and wants to be in a pluralistic kind of an accepting space.
So on that positive note, I'd like to first of all thank all of you for joining me on this fifth episode of From Mount Carmel. This is Moriah. And, we've heard various stories here tonight and, very different stories, but still there was a little bit of commonality between all of them. And so I'd like to thank again Gil and Nicole. I'd like to thank Yaakov Steinberg, and I'd like to thank Tal Gazit for joining us. So this is what Moriah looks like, not just a congregation, but we are a family. And as we've heard today, there is no single story that defines us. And our congregation is made up from people from across the globe, from every walk of life, and also from here in Israel. Some arrived in Israel only recently, while others were born here. Some came searching for a purpose, others for family, others simply just because they wanted a place to belong. Yet, despite the different journeys, each of our guests found something here that cannot be measured by a building or a membership list. They found a community. That's what Moriah has always aspired to be, a place where people discover not only Jewish tradition, but meaningful friendships, thoughtful conversations, shared responsibility, and a sense that no one walks through life alone. So if today's stories resonated with you, we invite you to share this episode, subscribe to our podcast, and tell others about the remarkable people who make our congregation what it is. So wherever you're listening or tuning in, watching us around the world, we want to thank you for joining us. And until the next time, from the slopes of Mount Carmel, overlooking the beautiful Haifa Bay, this has been From the Carmel. This is Moriah. The show was produced by Nicole Cutler. I'm Eitan Kushner, your host, and we wish you a shalom u'lihitраot.